The morning of June 12, 2025, began like any other in Ahmadabad, but it ended in a nightmare etched forever in the city's memory. Air India Flight 171, a state-of-the-art Boeing 787 Dreamliner, was just moments into its journey from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick when disaster struck. With 242 souls on board, the aircraft faltered, losing altitude with a terrifying slowness that was captured on security cameras. It then plunged into the bustling residential area of Meghaninagar, directly hitting the BJ Medical College hostel and nearby living quarters. The impact was catastrophic, but what followed was an inferno of unimaginable scale, a direct consequence of the nearly 125,000 liters of jet fuel igniting upon impact. This was no ordinary fire. It created a hellscape where temperatures soared to almost 1,000 degrees Celsius. The fireball that erupted was so intense that it consumed everything in its path, turning a vibrant neighborhood into a scene of utter devastation. Rescue operations were launched immediately, but the first responders faced an almost impossible task. The searing heat kept them at bay, melting their equipment and making any attempt to reach potential survivors a life-threatening challenge. The crash not only claimed the lives of those on the plane, but also those on the ground, with initial reports suggesting at least 29 fatalities and over 50 injuries among the residents of Meghaninagar. The community, which had been going about its daily routine just moments before, was now at the heart of India's deadliest aviation disaster since 1996, its peace shattered by an event that felt both surreal and cruelly personal. Amid the overwhelming loss, a story of improbable survival emerged, a single flicker of hope in a sea of despair. Out of the 242 people aboard Flight 171, one man, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, a 40-year-old British national, was pulled from the wreckage alive. He was found with multiple severe injuries but was miraculously reported to be out of danger, becoming the sole survivor of the flight. His survival is a testament to the sheer randomness of fate, a stark contrast to the tragic end met by the other 241 passengers and crew members. The final death toll, including those on the ground, tragically rose to 260, a number that represents hundreds of shattered families and broken hearts across India and the United Kingdom. The impact on Ahmedabad was profound and immediate. The city was united in grief, its residents watching in horror as the news unfolded. The BJ Medical College, a center of healing and learning, became a symbol of immense loss. The difficult and heart-wrenching process of identifying the victims began, a task made incredibly complex by the severity of the fire. For weeks, forensic teams worked tirelessly, using DNA matching and facial recognition to give names to the deceased and provide closure to their grieving families. This tragedy was not just a headline, it was a deep wound inflicted on the community, a scar that would forever mark the city's landscape and its collective psyche. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, the primary focus shifted from rescue to investigation. Why did a modern, technologically advanced aircraft like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, known for its impeccable safety record, fall from the sky? This question echoed in the minds of investigators, aviation experts, and the grieving public alike. A high-level committee was promptly established by India's aviation regulators to lead the inquiry, tasked with piecing together the final moments of Flight 171. The recovery of the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder was a critical breakthrough. These devices hold the key to understanding what transpired in the cockpit, offering a potential timeline of technical failures or human decisions that led to the crash. Early theories began to circulate as investigators analyzed the available evidence. The fact that the crew managed to make a mayday call just before communication was lost suggested they were aware of a critical emergency. Speculation ranged from a catastrophic technical failure, such as a problem with the wing flaps, to the possibility of fuel contamination. Another terrifying scenario considered was a double-engine failure, an extremely rare event that would leave the pilots with very few options so close to the ground. While a bird strike is often a consideration in incidents occurring during takeoff or landing, initial analysis of footage did not show any birds near the aircraft, making this theory less probable in the early stages of the investigation. The crash sent shockwaves through the global aviation industry. This was the first ever fatal incident involving the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, an aircraft that had been in service for over a decade and was considered one of the safest in the world. The news caused Boeing's stock to plummet by nearly 9%, reflecting the serious concerns about the potential implications for its flagship fleet. In response, Air India announced a comprehensive review of its entire fleet of Dreamliners, grounding planes for inspection to prevent any possibility of a recurring issue. The investigation was not just about finding blame, it was about ensuring the safety of millions of passengers who fly on these planes every day around the world. For the families of the victims, the wait for answers is an agonizing part of their grieving process. Understanding what went wrong is a crucial step toward finding some semblance of closure. The investigation is a meticulous and often slow process, requiring experts to analyze every fragment of wreckage, every line of data from the flight recorders, and every word from the cockpit conversation. The findings will have far-reaching consequences, potentially leading to new safety protocols and design modifications for aircraft worldwide. For Ahmadabad, the outcome of this investigation is not just a matter of technical interest. It is a search for meaning in the midst of an unbearable tragedy that struck so close to home. The horror of the 2025 crash brought back painful memories for many in Ahmadabad, memories of another aviation disaster that had scarred the city nearly 4 decades earlier. On October 19, 1988, Indian Airlines Flight 113, a Boeing 737 traveling from Mumbai, met its tragic end during its final approach to Ahmedabad's airport. The aircraft was carrying 135 people, all of whom were just minutes away from a safe landing. However, in the poor visibility of that fateful evening, the plane descended too early, its wings clipping trees and then a high-tension electricity pylon near the village of Chilota Kotarpur, just a couple of kilometers short of the runway. The impact caused the aircraft to crash and burst into flames. The loss of life in the 1988 crash was staggering. Of the 135 individuals on board, 133 perished, including all 6 crew members. The crash site was a scene of chaos and devastation, as rescuers and local villagers rushed to help, only to be confronted by the wreckage and the fire. This tragedy shook the nation and raised serious questions about aviation safety standards at the time. Unlike the 2025 crash, where technical failure is a leading theory, the investigation into the 1988 incident pointed decisively towards human error. A court of inquiry was established to determine the cause, and its findings were a damning indictment of the flight crew's actions. The official inquiry concluded that the primary cause of the crash was a grave error in judgment by both the pilot and the co-pilot. The report detailed a series of reckless decisions, noting that the crew attempted to land in visibility conditions that were far below the required minimum. Critically, it was found that the poor visibility on the ground had not been communicated effectively to the aircraft by air traffic control, a contributing factor that compounded the crew's mistakes. The pilots, acting with what was described as recklessness, proceeded with the landing attempt without receiving proper clearance, a fatal deviation from standard operating procedure that sealed the fate of almost everyone on board. The consequences of the Flight 113 crash were significant, leading to a review of landing procedures and communication protocols between air traffic controllers and pilots, particularly in adverse weather conditions. It served as a stark reminder that even with reliable aircraft, the human element remains the most critical component of flight safety. For Ahmadabad, it was the first time the city had experienced an aviation tragedy of this magnitude. The names of the victims were etched into the public consciousness, and the memory of that day served as a somber backdrop to the city's growth, a ghost from the past that has now been tragically joined by the memory of Flight 171. Comparing the tragedies of 1988 and 2025 reveals both stark differences and haunting similarities. The crash of Indian Airlines Flight 113 was attributed to pilot error in poor visibility, a failure of human judgment. In contrast, the Air India Flight 171 disaster is currently pointing towards a potential catastrophic technical failure in a highly modern aircraft under clear skies. One happened in a field on the outskirts of the city, the other in a dense residential neighborhood. Yet, despite these differences in cause and location, the outcome was tragically similar. A massive loss of life, a city plunged into mourning, and a community left to grapple with questions of what if. Both incidents serve as grim bookends to decades of aviation progress, showing that vulnerability remains a constant companion to flight. The collective trauma inflicted by these two events runs deep within the fabric of Ahmadabad. The 1988 crash left an indelible mark on an older generation, a story of loss that was passed down through the years. The 2025 crash ripped open that old wound while creating a fresh, gaping one for a new generation. For the residents of Meghaninagar, the crash was not a distant news event, but a violent intrusion into their homes and lives, turning a place of sanctuary into a scene of unimaginable horror. The skyline of Ahmadabad is now marked by two invisible scars, reminders of moments when the sky, usually a symbol of freedom and possibility, delivered death and destruction to their doorstep. Remembering these tragedies is not about dwelling on the pain, but about honoring the lives that were lost and learning the lessons they have left behind. Each of the 133 victims of Flight 113 and the 260 victims of Flight 171 was a person with a story, a family, and a future that was cut short. Memorializing them ensures that they are not reduced to mere statistics in a report. Furthermore, these disasters must serve as catalysts for change. The 1988 crash led to crucial updates in pilot training and ATC communication. The investigation into the 2025 crash will undoubtedly lead to new safety protocols for the next generation of aircraft, potentially saving countless lives in the future. Ultimately, the tales of these two crashes are woven into the identity of Ahmadabad. They are stories of profound loss but also of resilience, of a community that has twice faced the unthinkable and has had to find a way to heal. They underscore the immense responsibility that rests on the shoulders of the aviation industry, the manufacturers, the airlines, and the regulators, to prioritize safety above all else. For the people of Ahmadabad, looking up at the sky will forever be a different experience, tinged with a quiet prayer for those who took their final journey from this city and never made it home. It is in remembering their stories that we find the resolve to ensure such tragedies never happen again.